So hello and welcome to this little vlogcast or podcast interview. And later on, we're going to be taking some Q&A with our community. And Rick, I really wanted to get you on. You've interviewed me a couple of times, and I've always had a great time in discussion with you. We have some similar philosophies and ideas about photography, and some that differ. And I think having different opinions is good for the whole of photography, or any idea. We always have some opposing ideas or alternate ideas. And so I just wanted to sit down and talk to you. So welcome, Rick. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you, Ron. For the people watching, I've only met you once in my life, right?
Yeah, in real life, yeah.
In real life, I think it was like 5 years ago, or maybe longer. We were in California. Was it California?
Yeah, so we were in, was it San Francisco?
It was San Francisco, and I liked you immediately. Trey Ratcliffe was doing this thing. He brought us all together, and I said, this is a guy, you know what's funny, or what's interesting, I become friends with people I respect. I was talking to my friends, how do you become friends with someone? And well, you're a very loving, giving, sharing person, but I also really respect you. And I think that's, I'm proud to call you my friend.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. And it goes two ways. Something that I had the pleasure of doing was contributing to a couple of your books. And I'm just going to do a really quick screen share here too, Rick. I would, because I love how you approach this, and I'll get you to talk about it as soon as I screen share it. And that was the Phototherapy book, which was a fantastic idea for a photographer. And share with us, how many books have you created, Rick?
Well, I think I'm working on number 42. It's a travel photographer's memoir. But Phototherapy, actually Phototherapy and PhotoQuest are my two best-selling books out of like 40 books or so, 42 books. And they have no pictures in them. And they're all words of wisdom, including words from you and some of Scott Kelby, Scott Bourne. Karen Hutton, I could go, I think you know Karen Hutton.
Oh, I know her well. Yeah, we're friends. Yeah.
But, I didn't want people with these two books, Phototherapy and PhotoQuest, I didn't want them to be distracted with my pictures, with pretty colors and sunsets, or Africa or Antarctica, where you've been. I love your pictures from Antarctica. And actually, you talk about Antarctica, lessons you learned from the, was it lessons from the penguins, or it was lessons that you learned down there?
Yeah, anyway, more or less. Antarctica for me was really how travel to extreme places actually helps me with extreme moods. And so there's all kinds of lessons to be learned in travel, as you know. But we'll get back to that. But the phototherapy and motivation led to not just a book of wisdom from yourself and other creatives, but you launched your because of COVID, you've launched a Facebook community that's really doing well.
Yeah, we have 3,000 members, and it's a place, no political stuff, which is really good. And it's just all about photography. And one of the chapters in Phototherapy is what does your photography mean to you? And I came up with this idea in one of my workshops, asking people what does it mean to them. And actually, we were sitting around a campfire in Montana. This was like 15 years ago. When I asked the question, what does it mean to you? The sun was setting, we were having some drinks, and some people actually cried because they realized, and I know for you, after watching your TED Talk, how important your photography is and how important photography is to people. So, timing, one of my expressions, Ron, is you don't drown by falling in water. It's not mine, it's a Zig Ziglar saying, but I use it all the time. You don't drown by falling in water. You only drown if you stay there. So it sounds funny, and I know it sounds funny, but it's true. And I'm not going to drown because of COVID. So I'm doing books, and I started this. So
it's funny you bring that up. I'm going to do another screen share because one of the other, I have 3 pages open, and one of the other pages I had open in the background was already that page. What does your photography mean to you? Because I know because of your writing and our discussions together, photography is more than just the act of taking pictures. And I actually want to talk a little bit more about that and dig into that. You're a photographer. Many photographers get into photography because, first of all, the technology attracts them. And I believe, in the beginning, I was first an artist. So I come at photography as an artist rather than a technician, even though I learned the technology. I mean, in the 70s and 80s, we learned all about stop bass and f-stops and apertures and formulas, and something shifted in photography. And so now we're in a digital age where you can make really good pictures without understanding the science. And that's brought a whole new wave of creativity to our craft. And so today we have a lot of photographers, maybe they don't know that much about the technology, but they're creating wonderful images. And so one of the things I do is I tell people, first of all, a portrait photographer, and I take photographs of nature and I take photographs of people. But you specialize in not specializing. So tell me about that.
Well, I like to say I do it all. People ask me, Ron, what's your specialty? I say my specialty is not specializing because I like to do wildlife. I like to do portraiture. I like to do studio work back here. I like to do HDR. I did underwater. All I did was underwater for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think, what you learn in one area, you could apply to another area. So I've come up with this new thing lately, and I'm pretty psyched about it. It's called, what cross training is, right?
Yeah.
You run, you hike, you do this and that, you swim. When you exercise some muscles here, it affects the other muscles, and it's really generates a good sense of health and well-being. So that's cross training. Well, what I'm into now is photo cross training. So you mentioned that you're a studio photographer. Well, if you're a studio photographer and you're looking at the light and you're looking for the expression and you're looking at the background, you could apply all those techniques to photographing penguins in Antarctica. If you're good at flower photography, where shallow depth of field is important, and the background and close up and the bokeh effect is important. If you're good at food photography, you're probably good at flower photography, which brings up something else. And I know you're going to like this. I don't know. I think you might like it. Have you and I talked about superpowers?
We may have in the past, although I've had that conversation a couple of times. So, yeah.
Well, what the superpowers are is basically, I was talking to my son who's getting his PhD in finance, and he's good at this, he's good at that. So he's good at a lot of different things. So I said, Marco, a lot of people I know, like Ron and some of my other photographer friends, they're really good at not only one thing, or like Scott Kelby, right? Scott Kelby's good at photography, Photoshop, Lightroom, bass, drums, and guitar, and singing and recording. He's good at a lot of things. So the superpower thing is, what's your superpower that makes you good at everything? So taking photography out of the question for the people, out of the situation for the people who are watching, take photography out of the question. What makes you good at what you do? And some people say it's a dedication. Some people say it's a drive. Some people say it's a feeling of never giving up. Some people say it's whatever. So all these people have different superpowers. So I'd like to ask the people watching, what's your superpower that makes you good at what you do?
Yeah.
My wife's superpower, my son said, is empathy. She's so kind. She's the kindest person on the planet. She follows the Buddhist expression of, if you think you could be right or kind, be kind, right? So it's good.
That's
but
a good saying.
It's a good one. Anyway, if you take photography out of the equation, say what makes me good at what I do, I think it's an interesting question, and actually might help you get better at what you do once you realize what your superpower is. If I could just dwell on this for another 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Ron, who's the superhero who is the most powerful superhero? Who has the most superpowers?
Who has the most superpowers? Oh, I don't know. That's always a hard question to answer, but people would think Superman, but then we got Iron Man now these days, right?
Right. So Superman, that's what everyone says first. He has superpowers. What's Batman's superpower? Batman doesn't have any superpowers.
No, he can think. He uses his head. Yeah.
Exactly right. And that's what Ansel Adams said. He said, your most powerful, your most important accessory is the 12 inches behind the camera.
Yeah.
And Batman, it's his courage. That's one of his superpowers. So anyway, I think the whole superpower thing is interesting, an interesting topic for discussion.
Yeah. So I'd like to spin off that. In coming back to photography, I mean, this is, I want to hear more about you, but I kind of say, do what you can't help but do. And for me, that's to use my camera as a tool of connection, not just to create images of this amazing world around me, but to connect to people. That's why I'm a mentor. That's why I do photography education. That's why whatever I do, I connect with people. It's what makes this COVID thing very difficult for me, because I'm used to connecting with real people all the time. And I love this platform. I love that you and I can sit down and have this discussion with a group of people, because that's another way to connect. And so I would say one of my superpowers is connection, that the camera connects me. I always say when I write a book, the first book I write is going to be called It's Not About the Camera, It's About Connection. Because as much as I love creating images, the real joy for me comes from the connections it creates, both the connection to the world and landscape around me, and to the connection to the people, the students and the clients that I meet. And so that's a great analogy about superpowers.
Well, I think that is one of your many superpowers. You are a great communicator. You know, Scott Kelby said his superpower is teaching, one of his superpowers.
Yeah, it's funny. I know Scott marginally and Calibra, and I was thinking back to a time when I was working in the darkroom and working with cameras. You know, I had one of my first cameras was a Nikon F2 camera built in the 70s. And I remember some of the first editions of Photoshop User Magazine, and who's this guy, Scott Kelby? Like, I wanted to know, who's this guy, Scott Kelby? And all these years later, you know, I've met him and I know his work and his platform, you know, Kelby Media. He's built a bit of an empire by being a great educator. And this is one of your gifts too, Rick. I mean, you do workshops around the world. You've been all over the world. And I'm going to do a screen share here. I'm just going to share. We share a lot of things in common, like Antarctica and Africa. I've been to Botswana just like you. But I want to share this one because this is on my bucket list that I haven't done yet. And this is Iceland. And so, oh man, what I want to show people, I mean, when we first met, we had a discussion about, you initially said, I'm not an artist, I'm a photographer. And I said, well, I'm an artist, but I use a camera. And we had this kind of back and forth. And here's one place I disagree with you. I think you are an artist. And I'm going to show people one of the reasons I think that. First of all, I think being an artist is revealing something about the world around us. And you have a language. So as a photographer, what I want to notice about this gallery is even though it's got horses and ice and clouds and landscapes, there's a unified feeling. One of the guests we had on recently was John Paul Caponegro, an incredible artist. And he doesn't call himself a photographer. He calls himself an artist. I mean, his dad calls himself a photographer, but John Paul has a body of work that it's him. You know, it's unmistakably him. And I think you have a language about your work as well. And even if we look at a portrait of an Icelandic pony or a portrait of the ice, I think these all carry your fingerprints. And so I think this is what happens when we develop our language as a creative person, not just a photographer, but whatever your creative tool, your pen, your keyboard, your paintbrush, your camera. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. And one of the things on my bucket list is clearly something like this. And so maybe this is something you and I could do together in the future. Who knows what'll happen after COVID.
Oh man, if we did I think we would have to change the name to a fun shop because I think we'd have so much fun. Yeah, but these are the, you know what, if you could go back, I would like to, you know, as long as we're looking at pictures, if you could click on, let's see if you could click on one picture.
We're back here.
Can you click on, maybe you can't go back.
Yeah.
Okay, right where your cursor is, click on that one, the black and white with the lenticular.
Oh my.
What's interesting about this, I have what I call my one picture promise. And here's my one picture promise to everyone who's listening and to all my workshop students and book readers or whatever. And my one picture promise is this: if you're in a situation, if you say to yourself, if I could only take one picture, what would that one picture be? Meaning the composition, the exposure, the lens, the aperture, the shutter speed, the ISO, all this stuff. If I could only take one picture, what would that one picture be? I promise you that you get a higher percentage of creative pictures and fewer outtakes, and you won't have to go through a million pictures. So the story behind this picture is we're at we're at a geyser and it's erupting, and you have the blue water where it's erupting and the steam, but the light wasn't that great. So I say to the students, I say, okay, I'm going to give you my one picture promise. So I give them the promise, and I walk away. I said, let me see what you come up with. So anyway, behind the geyser were these beautiful lenticular clouds. And I'd say half the people photographed the clouds and not the geyser, thinking about the one picture. So there's another thing here, that sometimes the subject is not the subject. So in other words,
Yes.
we're at the geyser and this and that, and it's steaming and blue water, and it's dramatic and everything, but it was the scene behind it that was a lot more interesting. So anyway, for those watching, I'd say, I'd suggest try my one picture promise and see what happens.
I'm thrilled you brought that up for two reasons. One is don't forget to turn around.
Yes.
Big lesson. I think I first started practicing that back in Haiti. Somebody, it may have been you, somebody challenged me to turn around when I was there. And I began to incorporate that back then. And it's led to a lot of really good photographs. But what I want to point out to especially my students who are watching that, or some of them are here with us, is to point out a couple of things we've recently covered. And that's one of the things is this idea that what's the point? I heard you guys talking about what's the point, and some kind of things like, why does it matter? But why I find this image remarkably powerful is you may have had, you said, the subject you were shooting may not have been ideal. The lighting might not have been ideal, but you were willing to pivot or shift quickly, which is important to be able to abandon an idea that's not working instead of trying to force it to work when there's other opportunities. And what you did here was remarkable in that the foreground, the ground, takes up maybe a tenth of the frame or less, because you want us to look at these lenticular clouds. And I think that what the really powerful thing is this, what we call two things working together is called point and counterpoint. So the dark cloud here with that bright cloud above are making a really nice point and counterpoint. But also this idea that I teach my students about shapes that are echoed. And so we have the echo of shapes, which is natural for lenticular clouds to do. So beautiful image. And I really like you sharing about if you only had one image, to make.
Yeah, the one picture promise works. I'm on my workshops, so people say, hey, Rick, how come you're not shooting? I say, I'm not just going to shoot, it'd be like watching TV. What are you going to do tonight? I'm going to watch TV. You don't watch TV just to watch TV. You watch it to learn from the new, well, I'm not going to get into you get to watch a movie or whatever. So anyway, I think, you want to have a purpose. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to take a picture if I'm not going to do anything with it, except, maybe I'm sure you do the same thing, Ron, where you take maybe a snapshot compared to like a great shot. So you could show the difference. Maybe just how moving a little helps.
Yeah. Part of what I teach is, when you arrive at a spot, everybody wants to get the first image. You want to get it, but that's rarely the image. Like you really have to consider what you're photographing.
Yeah.
Some great advice that I bring along when I'm, especially in a place that you're in a once in a lifetime place. You can relate to this. Let's put ourselves in Antarctica, and you're seeing a big colony of penguins for the first time. And it's very overwhelming. It can be actually quite emotional. I remember, after 3 days down in Antarctica, the clouds began to lift, and I hadn't seen the scale of it yet. I didn't understand where I was yet. And as the clouds lifted, the scale was magnificent. And I was completely overwhelmed. And a piece of advice that I took with me from a photographer I really admired, Daisy Gilardini, a Nikon ambassador and an incredible wildlife photographer, said, don't chase the image. Go and wait for the image. Be patient. Have a thought in your mind or a plan, because the more you chase it, the more it eludes you.
Yeah.
That was great advice. And since then, I've been learning to be more patient. Of course, the more times you visit a place, the more you're able to know what you're waiting for. When you're there the first time, you don't know, and you have this tendency to want to run and take a picture of everything. And what you come home with is a whole bunch of average pictures.
Yes. And who wants that? Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation? Have you been to South Georgia, by the way? Okay. So
Many times. Yeah.
South Georgia is where they have the king penguins.
Yeah.
And the king penguins are really high. The other penguins are nice, but the emperors and the kings are,
Yeah.
they're
There's
just so, they're
about
so
36
majestic.
inches for a king. Or, yeah.
Oh man, they're beautiful. So has this ever happened to you? Have you ever been in a situation where you take a picture and you say to yourself, I'm not going to get a better picture of this certain subject? Has this ever happened? It may not have. I'm just asking because I have a story.
Well, there is one. I remember we went at sunrise. We got up at 3 a.m. on the ship and we zodiaced out. And as part of the team, we were scouting because we have to scout the location first. And we got there just as the sun rose. And because there are thousands of penguins in front of you, I turned around toward the water where the sun was rising and I laid down in the sand. And a few penguins walked in front of me, and one single penguin was silhouetted against the sunrise. And that morning that I hit that picture and I thought, that's the one. Like, that's the one that I'm not, at least that morning, maybe not ever, but that morning that I wouldn't get a better picture of.
Well, I've been in a situation. Can you go on my website again, the galleries?
Yeah, sure.
And I'll share this story if I may. And it's the second gallery. India is first. Eos are at the bottom of the world. That's it. And okay, you see the second picture from the top, the three penguins? Yeah, if you could click on that. So we're in South Georgia. And before I left home, Ron, this is the kind of picture I wanted to get. I wanted to get close up of the penguins, of the king penguins. I wanted to get the colony in the back of millions of penguins, and I want to get the mountain. So I'm shooting with my EOS R. I have it down. I have the screen flipped out, and I'm shooting on rapid frame advance, and I'm walking along these penguins. I'm shooting at 35mm setting.
Yeah.
So this picture is cropped. As you know, you can't get closer than 15 feet to the animals, but they could get closer to you.
Yeah, they can walk to you, which happens with these guys.
I know, it's so cool. So as you know, before I finish this story, as you know, your time on shore is limited, right? You just can't, stay there.
Yeah.
So I was on this A&K ship, and as a photo pro, I could have stayed out all day. But I'm there in the morning and I'm walking along and I get this picture that shows the separation of the animals, the isolation of the heads, the background. I'm shooting at a small aperture. It shows gesture of the penguin on the right. It shows the movement. And after I took this picture, I said, I'm not going to get a better picture. Now, maybe that's a bad thing to do, but I said, I don't think. So I went back to the ship and I processed it, and I just couldn't wait to see, what I could do with it. So I guess what I'm saying is I was just so happy with the single picture, and it's never happened to me before.
So many things came together. I know this Salisbury Plain. I know this very spot. And,
right.
I've shot here, and I mean, all the elements are coming together, but chance favors the prepared mind. Like, great photographs favor the prepared photographer. Mm-hmm. And here you are, you're doing all the things right. I mean, you're low, that you have to get low to really show these penguins off. If you can shoot at or below eye level, that's a fantastic thing. And it's why I'm dressed in completely waterproof and penguin poo proof clothing. And I often get back to the ship and literally I don't take all my gear off. I just go to the shower and jump in the shower in my gear.
I've done it.
Because you know what that smells like. But
oh God, I could smell it just looking at the picture.
But you have these guys walking across as they do, and that one penguin made that gesture, and like you got it, like you were prepared. You were already prepared, you were already low, you already saw the composition forming, and were able to just, it's kind of like a quarterback running down the field and then turning to catch the ball, and the ball's there.
Right. Like how can he make a better pass? But I guess he could have. But I guess what I'm saying is let me ask you a question that we could have a whole discussion on this. How do you know when a picture is good? Or how do you know when linguine clam sauce is good? How does if a guitar solo is good? How do we know?
Yeah. And we say it's subjective, but I think there's a bit of objectivity, because most of us would agree when a picture doesn't look good. Well, so we can know that.
Yeah, if
we can know that, we can know the opposite, right?
Yeah, if we can't tell what it is, or if it's not flattering to the, if it's a person, we know when it's not good. That's a good point too. But how do you know? And I think some people said it's by looking at, we look at a lot of pictures and we decide what's good, but, you know,
I want to have
it,
a chance to get to a few questions before
sure,
you have to go
sure.
today, but I would say to that, as we segue, this is a great time to open up to Q&A to talk about that question. First, I opened up by saying that you and I have a couple of differing views. One was,
Mhm.
I believe that specializing can lead to specifically financial, but success in mastering an area of life or photography quicker than generalizing. But you've been at this a long time. You've been taking pictures for a long time. And so you've been growing your level of mastery. And you said you did underwater photography, for example, for 20 years, and then took all your lessons and moved it into general photography. Most people start out as generalists, and then as they want to perhaps create a business, create it around a specialty, which is easier to elevate, I find. But I'm not really a specialist. I would say I'm a specialist at character portraits, but that goes for penguins or people. My images are portraits. But I feel that we can generalize, but if you want to level up and move it into a realm of mastery, specialty is a good thing to do. And that's maybe
Yeah.
where I don't know if we disagree, but where I would guide people when they get to a level, they might want to hone in or get a sharper focus, at least for a time.
Well, I have a lot of professional friends who specialize, like Jonathan and Angela Scott, some of
Yes,
your, the big cat people. He
that's
was a
right.
big cat man. He had the Big Cat Tales on TV as a series on Netflix. They're wildlife photographers. I don't think he's ever taken a picture in a studio, and he's very successful.
Yeah.
Art Wolf started out as a wildlife photographer, nature photographer, but he does amazing body paintings. I mean, he
Okay.
paints the bodies
Yeah,
and
yeah.
photographs them. Someone asked, what's my superpower? And I think one of my superpowers is never giving up. I never
I
give
like
up.
that.
I
It,
just, with all the books I have, I got a lot of rejections in my life. I don't give up, ever.
yeah, that's great. And that goes right along with your idea that if you fall in the water, don't stay there.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, Rick, I really appreciate you being here. I'm gonna switch this over and we're gonna do some Q&A, but thanks for doing the interview
Sure.
part. We never have enough time. We could talk all day long. Well, that's our interview for today. Rick had to jump off quickly. He had another appointment to go to. And I just wanted to mention, I hadn't mentioned his links. If you look up Rick Sammon, Sammon, you can look him up on YouTube. He's got lots of content there, and look up his website, ricksammon.com. But he does really well with social media, and he's pretty easy to find. And check out his Facebook group, Phototherapy. It's a really great place for inspiration. Again, thank you, Rick, for joining me on the show. And thank you guys for watching. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Talk to you soon.